Katie Sullivan stood in the morning formation with 200 other cadets. The sun was just rising over the crystal towers of the Galactic Military Academy. She kept her back straight and her eyes forward, just like the other students around her. But she knew that most of them were not like her. Most of them had claws or thick armor or could lift 3 times what she could lift. Most of them were not human. The Academy sat on a planet called Kepler Prime, far from Earth. Katie had been here for 6 months now, and every single day had been hard. Not because the training was too difficult. She could handle the training. She grew up in the mountains of Montana, tracking animals through the snow and living for weeks with almost nothing. The hard part was the way the instructors looked at her. The hard part was knowing they wanted her to fail. Chief Instructor Vex walked down the line of cadets. He was a Kryn, which meant he looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and a hard shell that covered his whole body. His compound eyes could see in all directions at once. Silver tips on his mandibles showed that he had been a soldier for many years. When he reached Katie, he stopped. He always stopped when he reached her. "The human cadet meets minimum height requirements," he said. His voice came out in clicks and whistles that her translator earpiece turned into words. "She barely qualifies for this program. It makes one wonder if humans truly belong in a military academy at all." Katie said nothing. She had learned not to respond to these comments. The instructors wanted her to argue back so they could punish her for disrespect. She just kept looking straight ahead while the other cadets shifted on their feet. Some of them looked uncomfortable. Others seemed to agree with Vex. Humans had only joined the Galactic Coalition 5 years ago. Before that, no one even knew Earth existed. When the Coalition ships first met human explorers near Jupiter, they ran tests on the humans. They measured their strength, their speed, their healing time. They looked at human skin and saw that it was soft. They looked at human hands and saw no claws. They decided that humans were a prey species, weak and fragile, who got lucky with technology. Katie volunteered for the Academy because someone told her that humans could not handle military training. That was exactly the kind of challenge she could not walk away from. Her grandfather had been a Marine on Earth. He taught her how to hunt, how to track, how to survive when everything went wrong. He told her that the most important skill was not giving up no matter what. "Today we announce the wilderness survival exercise," Vex said to all the cadets. "Each of you will be dropped alone into the Razorback Mountains. You will have minimal supplies. You must survive for 5 days and reach the extraction point 40 miles from your starting location. This exercise separates those who truly belong here from those who do not." The Razorback Mountains were the most dangerous place on Kepler Prime. Katie had studied them in her classes. The peaks were so sharp they could cut through equipment. The temperature went from freezing cold at night to burning hot during the day. Plants there released toxins that made most species sick. Animals that lived in those mountains were all predators, each one fighting for territory. "Failure means immediate dismissal from the Academy," Vex continued. "There are no second chances in this exercise. If you cannot complete it, you do not belong in the Coalition forces." His eyes fixed on Katie when he said this. She felt the weight of his stare but kept her face calm. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her worry. Around her, the other cadets whispered to each other. She caught some of their words. They were betting that she would not make it past the first day. They said no human had ever completed this exercise. They said Vex was finally going to get rid of the weak link in their class. After the formation ended, Katie walked back to her quarters alone. Her room was small, but it was hers. On the walls she had put up pictures from Earth. There was one of the Montana mountains where she grew up. There was one of her grandfather in his old Marine uniform. She touched the frame of that picture gently. "They think I will quit," she said to the picture. "They think 5 days in the mountains will break me. They do not know that I grew up in places just as hard. They do not know what humans can do when we have to survive." She pulled out her survival kit and spread everything on her bed. The Academy would give her a basic pack, but she knew it would not be enough. They would make sure of that. So she added her own supplies, things she had bought or made herself. A small signal mirror that could reflect sunlight for miles, paracord that was thin but incredibly strong, a water filter she built using materials from the engineering lab. Each item had multiple uses if she was smart about it. Katie checked every piece of gear twice, then 3 times. Her grandfather taught her that preparation was the difference between living and dying. She rolled everything tight and packed it carefully. The weight distribution had to be perfect or it would slow her down over 40 miles. There was a knock on her door. She opened it to find another human cadet standing there. His name was Connor Blake, and he was one of only 5 humans in the entire academy. He looked worried. "Katie," he said quietly, "everyone is saying that Vex rigged this exercise against you. They are saying he picked the worst possible drop zone. They are saying he wants you to fail so badly that he might even sabotage your supplies." "Probably," Katie said. She kept packing her gear. "That just means I need to be better prepared than anyone else." Connor shook his head. "You could file a complaint. You could tell them that this is not fair." "And then what?" Katie asked. "They dismissed the complaint and I still have to do the exercise, but now everyone knows I tried to get out of it." "No. I will do this their way. I will go into those mountains and I will come out the other side. And when I do, they will have no excuses left." Connor was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It was an emergency beacon, the kind that could send a distress signal to orbiting ships. "Take this," he said. Just in case, Katie almost said no. But she saw the concern in his eyes and took it. She clipped it to her belt next to her knife. "Thanks," she said. After Connor left, Katie sat on her bed and looked at her packed gear. Tomorrow morning, they would load all the cadets onto transport shuttles. They would drop each cadet in a different part of the Razorback Mountains. Then the test would begin. She thought about all the times people told her she could not do something because she was human. When she first applied to the academy, 3 different officials told her to choose a different path. They suggested she work in communications or medical support or any job that did not require physical strength. They meant well, probably. They thought they were protecting her, but Katie did not need protection. She needed a chance to prove what humans could do. Every species in the galaxy seemed to think that strength meant big muscles or sharp claws. They looked at humans and saw soft skin and small teeth and decided that made humans weak. They did not understand that humans had survived on Earth by being smarter, tougher, and more stubborn than anything that tried to kill them. Katie lay down on her bed, but did not sleep much that night. She went over her survival plans in her head. She thought about water sources and shelter building. She thought about what plants she could eat and which ones would make her sick. She thought about how to move through hostile terrain without being seen. Her mind went through scenario after scenario until the sun started to rise. When morning came, Katie put on her combat uniform and picked up her pack. She looked one more time at the picture of her grandfather. "I will make you proud," she promised. The transport shuttle was already loaded with cadets when she arrived. She found a seat near the back and strapped in. The other cadets mostly ignored her, talking among themselves about their strategies. A few of them gave her pitying looks like she was already defeated. Chief Instructor Vex walked through the shuttle, checking each cadet. When he reached Katie, he stopped and looked down at her. "The Razorback Mountains show no mercy to the weak," he said. "I hope you have made peace with your limitations." Katie met his eyes. "I will see you at the extraction point, sir," she said firmly. Something flickered in Vex's expression. Then he moved on to the next cadet. The shuttle lifted off and headed toward the mountains. Katie pressed her face to the window and watched the academy disappear behind them. Ahead, the Razorback Mountains rose like a wall of teeth against the sky. Somewhere down there was her drop zone. Somewhere down there was 5 days of hell that she would have to survive. She was ready. She had been ready her whole life for a challenge like this. The instructors wanted to humiliate her. They wanted to prove that humans did not belong. Instead, Katie was going to show them exactly what a human could do when pushed to the edge. She was going to show them that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the mountains was not the one with claws and fangs. Sometimes it was the one who refused to give up. The shuttle door opened and cold air rushed in. Katie looked down at the narrow canyon below. Sharp rocks jutted up like broken glass. Thorny bushes covered the slopes. This was her drop zone, and it was exactly as bad as she expected. "Jump," the pilot said through the intercom. Katie did not hesitate. She stepped out of the shuttle and felt gravity take her. The ground rushed up fast. She landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact like her grandfather taught her. Pain shot through her shoulder, but nothing felt broken. She stayed down for a moment, catching her breath and checking her body. Bruised but functional. Good enough. The shuttle was already gone, leaving her alone in the canyon. Katie stood up slowly and looked around. The sun was just clearing the mountain peaks. She had maybe 10 hours of daylight to cover as much ground as possible. The extraction point was 40 miles northeast. She pulled out her compass and oriented herself, then started walking. Every step required attention. The rocks were loose and could turn an ankle easily. The thorny plants grabbed at her clothes and pack. She moved carefully but steadily, finding the safest path through the obstacles. This kind of terrain was familiar to her. Montana had plenty of places just as mean. By midday, Katie had covered about 8 miles. The temperature climbed until sweat soaked through her uniform. She found a stream running between the rocks and stopped to refill her water bottles. She added purification tablets and waited for them to work, using the time to eat some of her rations and check her feet for blisters. Something moved in the bushes uphill from her position. Katie froze, her hand moving to the knife on her belt. She watched the bushes, but nothing appeared. After a minute, she relaxed slightly. Probably just a small animal. The dangerous predators in these mountains were supposed to be bigger and much louder. She kept moving through the afternoon. The canyon opened up into a wider valley filled with rock formations and scattered trees. Katie chose a spot for her first camp near a cluster of boulders that would provide shelter from the wind. She gathered dead wood for a fire, being careful to select pieces that would not create much smoke. Building the shelter took an hour. She used fallen branches and broad leaves from the trees, layering them to create a waterproof roof. The structure was small but solid. It would keep her dry if it rained and hold in heat from her fire. Katie dug a small fire pit and lined it with rocks, then arranged her wood and kindling. Before she lit the fire, Katie set snares along what looked like animal trails. The snares were simple loops of paracord anchored to heavy rocks. If an animal ran through the loop, it would tighten and hold them. Her grandfather taught her how to place snares where animals would not see them until too late. She set 4 snares in different locations, increasing her chances. Darkness came fast in the mountains. Katie lit her fire and sat close to it, eating more rations and reviewing her map by firelight. She had covered good distance today, but tomorrow would be harder. The terrain ahead showed steep climbs and what looked like a deep gorge she would need to cross. She slept in short intervals, waking up every hour to check her surroundings and feed the fire. This was another skill from Montana. In dangerous territory, you never slept deeply. You stayed aware, always ready to move if something went wrong. The second day started with a surprise. One of her snares had caught something that looked like a rabbit, but with 6 legs and purple fur. Katie processed the animal quickly, skinning it and preparing the meat. She cooked some for breakfast and smoked the rest over her fire so it would last longer. Protein was important. Her body needed fuel to keep going. By noon on the second day, Katie had climbed out of the valley and onto a ridge that ran northeast. The views were stunning but dangerous. One wrong step and she would fall hundreds of feet. She moved slowly, testing each handhold and foothold before trusting her weight to it. That evening she found another good campsite in a cave that was just deep enough to protect her from the weather. She built her fire at the cave entrance and settled in for the night. She was tired but satisfied. 2 days down, 3 to go. She was making good time despite the difficult terrain. The third morning changed everything. Katie woke to find her backup water container had been punctured. Water had leaked out overnight, leaving her with only 1 bottle. She checked the container carefully. The hole was clean, almost like something sharp had poked through it deliberately. Katie felt anger rise in her chest. Someone had done this. Either a drone had snuck into her camp or the instructors had sent someone to sabotage her supplies. She should have expected this. They were not just testing her survival skills. They were actively trying to make her fail. She forced herself to stay calm. Anger would not help her now. She needed to adapt. Water was critical in this environment. She would need to find sources more often and could not afford to carry less. Katie checked her map and identified several streams between her position and the extraction point. She could make it work, but it would mean traveling closer to the valley floors where predators hunted. Fine, she said out loud to whoever might be listening through surveillance equipment. You want to make this harder? I can handle harder. Katie changed her strategy. Instead of following the obvious paths, she started moving through terrain where drones could not follow easily. She traveled through dense brush and tight passages between rocks. She moved at night when surveillance was more difficult. If the instructors wanted to sabotage her, she would make it as hard as possible for them. The third day turned into the third night. Katie made a cold camp, meaning no fire. She did not want to give away her position. She ate dried meat from her earlier catch and drank carefully from her remaining water. The temperature dropped and she shivered in her shelter, but she had been cold before. Cold was just another thing to endure. On the fourth day, Katie crossed a steep ravine using a narrow stone bridge that looked like it might collapse at any moment. Halfway across, she felt eyes on her again. This time the feeling was stronger, more present. She stopped and scanned the area carefully. There, on a boulder above the ravine, 3 shapes sat watching her. Katie's breath caught. They were Vorath, the apex predators that ruled these mountains. But these were young ones, cubs maybe 6 months old. Each one was about 4 feet long with spotted fur that seemed to shift colors slightly. They had sharp claws and teeth that could easily tear through flesh. Katie knew that running would trigger their chase instinct. Predators loved to chase prey. Instead, she stayed still and met their eyes. She kept her breathing calm and her posture relaxed. She was not prey. She was another predator passing through their territory. After a long moment, she continued walking across the bridge, moving with the same steady confidence as before. The cubs did not attack. They just watched her with what looked like curiosity. When Katie reached the other side of the bridge, she glanced back. The cubs were following her, jumping down from their boulder and padding across the stone bridge with perfect balance. This was unexpected. Vorath were supposed to be aggressive toward other species, especially during their youth when they were establishing dominance. But these cubs seemed more interested than hostile. They kept their distance but clearly wanted to see where she was going. Katie decided to let them follow. They had not shown aggression, and trying to scare them off might change that. She continued northeast toward the extraction point, and the 3 cubs trailed behind her like strange shadows. By evening, the cubs were still there. Katie found a good spot for camp and went through her routine of building shelter and gathering firewood. She was very aware of the 3 young predators watching from about 30 feet away. They sat in a row, their golden eyes tracking every move she made. Katie set new snares, and this time she moved slowly and deliberately. She showed each step clearly, almost like she was teaching a class. She demonstrated how to find animal trails by looking for tracks and droppings. She showed how to place the snare where it would be hidden but effective. She pointed out the trigger mechanism and how it would tighten. The cubs watched everything. One of them, the one with spots that formed a pattern like a crown on its head, tilted its head and made a soft chirping sound. Katie had no idea what it meant, but it did not sound threatening. It sounded almost like acknowledgement. After Katie finished setting her snares and moved back to her camp, something remarkable happened. The cubs approached the snares carefully. They did not spring them. Instead, they studied the mechanisms closely, sniffing at the paracord and examining how it connected to the trigger. They were learning. Katie sat by her fire and watched them. She had learned about Vorath behavior in her xenobiology classes. Young Vorath learned primarily through observation and imitation. They watched their parents hunt and then practiced the same techniques. They also watched other predators and absorbed lessons from them. These cubs were treating her like another predator worth learning from. That realization sent a strange feeling through Katie. The instructors saw her as weak prey, something to be dismissed. But these wild predators recognized something different. They saw her methods, her efficiency, her purposeful movements through their territory. They saw a hunter. As night fell, the cubs settled down about 20 feet from Katie's fire. They did not sleep, but they did stop moving. They just watched Katie woke before dawn on the 5th day. The 3 Vorath cubs were already awake, sitting in their usual row and watching her morning routine. She had gotten used to their presence. It felt natural now, like having hunting partners rather than observers. She checked her snares and found success. A large ground bird was caught in one of the traps. Katie retrieved it carefully and began processing the kill. She worked with practiced efficiency, using every part of the animal she could. The cubs moved closer, watching how she used her knife and separated meat from bone. When Katie looked up, she saw something that made her stop. Near her other snare, the cubs had their own kill. A mountain hare lay on the ground, taken down cleanly with a bite to the neck. The cubs had not eaten it yet. Instead, they dragged it closer to Katie's camp and left it there. Katie stared at the offering. This was not random. The cubs had hunted successfully and chosen to share their kill with her. It was exactly what pack members did with each other. They were treating her like she belonged with them. "Thank you," Katie said softly. She processed both kills, then built up her fire to cook some of the meat. The rest she prepared for smoking so it would preserve longer. The cubs watched the entire process with intense focus. They were learning about fire, about cooking, about food preservation. Katie took a portion of the cooked bird and held it out toward the cubs. The crown-marked one approached first, moving slowly and keeping eye contact with her. It sniffed the meat carefully, then took it with surprising gentleness. The cub chewed slowly, experiencing cooked food for probably the first time in its life. The other two cubs watched their sibling. When nothing bad happened, they came forward and accepted their own portions. Katie smiled as she watched them figure out the new taste and texture. They seemed to like it, making small, satisfied sounds as they ate. After breakfast, Katie packed her gear and started moving toward the extraction point. She had about 12 miles left to cover. The terrain was getting easier, which meant she could make good time. The cubs followed immediately, falling into a pattern where they flanked her on both sides and slightly behind. It was a hunting formation, the kind used by pack predators to cover more ground and protect each other. Katie did not know that every moment was being recorded. High above the mountains, dozens of surveillance drones tracked her progress. In the Academy Command Center, Chief Instructor Vex watched the screens with an expression that his fellow officers could not quite read. "This is unprecedented," Captain Lyra said. She was a Sylvan, a species known for understanding behavior and psychology. The Vorath are treating her as a pack member. They are learning from her techniques. They have accepted her as one of them. Commander Throck, the massive Torgish officer, shook his head. His gray fur bristled with concern. Vorath cubs are dangerous. They are establishing dominance hierarchies at this age. They should be aggressive toward other species. This human is in serious danger whether she realizes it or not. Captain Lyra pulled up data on her console. "Look at the behavioral markers," she said. "The cubs show no aggression signals. No raised hackles, no bared teeth, no territorial displays. Instead, they show curiosity and what appears to be respect. They are mirroring her movements and learning her techniques. This is how young Vorath behave toward skilled hunters they want to learn from." Vex clicked his mandibles together, a sign of agitation. "How is this possible? Humans are prey species. They lack natural weapons. They lack the physical capabilities that predators respect." Captain Lyra turned to face him directly. "Permission to speak freely, sir." Vex nodded. "I believe our classification of humans as prey species is fundamentally flawed. We judge them based on physical attributes alone. We did not consider their behavioral patterns or evolutionary history." She brought up files on her screen showing videos from Earth. "Watch this. This is called persistence hunting. Early humans would track prey animals for days, sometimes weeks. They would follow the animal until it collapsed from exhaustion. No other species on Earth could match human endurance over long distances. The officers watched footage of humans tracking animals across vast landscapes. The humans never gave up, never stopped moving. They outlasted creatures that were faster and stronger. Here is another example," Lyra continued. She showed videos of humans hunting in coordinated groups. They used complex strategies, driving prey toward hidden hunters, setting traps, working together with perfect timing. This is pack hunting behavior. This is what predators do. Commander Throck watched the videos with growing surprise. "I was told humans achieved space travel through technological innovation alone. I was told they were scavengers who got lucky. That is what we all believed," Lyra said. "Because we did not look deep enough. Humans conquered every environment on their planet, from frozen poles to burning deserts. They climbed the highest mountains and crossed the deepest oceans. They survived extinction events that killed most other species. They did this not because they were physically superior, but because they refused to give up and they learned to adapt to anything." Vex was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke. "What you are saying is that the Vorath cubs see something in this human that we failed to see. They recognize her as a fellow predator because that is exactly what she is." "Yes, sir," Lyra said, "and if we continue to treat humans as weak prey, we are making a serious mistake in our evaluation protocols." Back in the mountains, Katie had no idea about the debate happening in the command center. She focused on the terrain ahead, climbing over a rocky slope that overlooked a wide valley. The extraction point was visible now, marked by a tall beacon about 8 miles away. The cubs suddenly stopped and made warning sounds. Katie froze and followed their gaze. Coming up the valley toward them were two massive shapes, adult Vorath, each one standing about 6 feet tall at the shoulder. Their fur was darker than the cubs, marked with scars from years of fighting and hunting. These had to be the parents. Katie's heart pounded. Adult Vorath were extremely dangerous. They were fiercely protective of their young. She had just spent 4 days traveling with their cubs. This could go very badly very quickly. The cubs rushed forward to meet their parents, chirping and making excited sounds. The adult Vorath lowered their heads and nuzzled the cubs, checking them for injuries. Then both adults looked directly at Katie. Katie held her ground. Running was not an option. She could not outrun a Vorath, and fleeing would mark her as prey. Instead, she stood tall and met their eyes. She kept her hands visible and her posture calm. She showed no fear, no aggression, just the quiet confidence of someone who belonged in this place. The crown-marked cub moved between Katie and its parents. It chirped urgently and began demonstrating something. Katie watched in amazement as the cub mimicked the snare-setting motion she had taught them. It showed its parents the technique, then gestured back toward Katie. The other two cubs joined in, showing their parents the preserved meat and making gestures that seemed to indicate Katie had taught them these things. They were explaining to their parents that this strange two-legged creature was not prey. She was a teacher. She was a hunter worth learning from. The adult Vorath watched their cubs' demonstration. Then they turned back to Katie and studied her for a long, tense moment. Katie barely breathed. Everything depended on what these predators decided about her. Slowly, deliberately, both adult Vorath lowered their heads. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, recognition between equals. They were not bowing in submission. They were showing respect to another predator who had earned it by teaching their young valuable skills. Katie felt emotion well up in her chest. She bowed her head in return, matching their gesture. When she looked up, the adult Vorath had turned and were walking back down the valley. The cubs stayed for a moment longer, the crown-marked one chirping a goodbye before following its parents. Katie watched them go until they disappeared into the forest. She stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. She had been recognized and accepted by the apex predators of this world, not because she had claws or fangs, not because she was physically powerful, but because she moved like a hunter, thought like a hunter, and survived like a hunter. In the command center, the officers watched the encounter in stunned silence. Even Vex seemed shaken by what they had witnessed. Captain Lyra finally spoke. "Sir, I recommend we extract the cadet immediately and begin comprehensive review of our evaluation protocols for all human cadets." Vex shook his head slowly. "No. Let her complete the exercise. She has earned that right. But prepare a formal ceremony for her arrival. What we just witnessed changes everything." Katie shouldered her pack and started walking toward the extraction point. She had 8 miles to go and a whole life ahead of her. A life where maybe, finally, someone would see humans for what they really were. Not weak prey to be protected or dismissed, but survivors, adapters and hunters who earned their place among the stars the same way they earned their place at the top of Earth's food chain. Through determination, intelligence, and the absolute refusal to give up no matter what stood in their way, Ched her with. Katie reached the extraction point 3 hours before the deadline. The beacon stood tall on a cleared hilltop, its light pulsing steadily. She was tired, dirty, and hungry, but she had made it. More than that, she had thrived. The mountains that were supposed to break her had instead proven what she always knew. Humans belonged here. She set down her pack and pulled out her emergency beacon to signal that she was ready for pickup. Before she could activate it, she heard the sound of engines. A shuttle was already descending toward the landing pad. That was unusual. Normally, cadets had to wait hours for extraction. The shuttle landed and the door opened. Chief Instructor Vex himself stepped out. Katie stiffened in surprise. Vex had never personally extracted a cadet from this exercise. He walked toward her, his forearms moving in precise coordination. His compound eyes reflected her image dozens of times. Behind Vex, Commander Throck emerged from the shuttle, followed by Captain Lyra and 3 other senior officers. This was definitely not normal. Katie stood at attention, unsure what was happening but ready for anything. Vex stopped in front of her. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly and deliberately, he raised all 4 of his arms in a formal Kryn salute. It was the highest sign of respect in his culture, reserved for warriors who had achieved something truly exceptional. "Cadet Katie Sullivan," Vex said formally. You have completed the Razorback survival exercise under conditions that were deliberately made more difficult than standard protocol. You have not only survived but excelled. More importantly, you have achieved something unprecedented in this Academy's 1,000-year history. Katie kept her face neutral, but inside she was confused. What did he mean by unprecedented? Surviving the exercise was the goal. Had she done something wrong? Captain Lyra stepped forward. She held a tablet showing video footage. Cadet, we need to show you something. With your permission? Katie nodded. Lyra turned the tablet so Katie could see. The video showed her in the mountains with the 3 Vorath cubs. It showed them watching her set snares. It showed them bringing her the hare. It showed her teaching them and feeding them cooked meat. Finally, it showed the encounter with the adult Vorath and the gesture of mutual respect. Katie watched the footage with growing understanding. The instructors had seen everything. They knew about the cubs. They knew about the bond that had formed. Do you understand what you accomplished? Lyra asked gently. Vorath are the apex predators of Kepler Prime. They are notoriously aggressive toward other species, especially during their juvenile phase. Yet these cubs not only tolerated your presence, they actively sought you out as a teacher. They treated you as a pack member. Their parents acknowledged you as an equal. Commander Throck spoke next, his deep voice carrying across the hilltop. We have studied Vorath behavior for decades. We have never seen them accept another species this way. The cubs recognized something in you that we failed to see. They recognized a fellow predator. Vex stepped closer to Katie. His mandibles moved, and what she had learned was a gesture of deep thought. I owe you an apology, Cadet Sullivan. I owe all human cadets an apology. We evaluated your species based on surface characteristics. We saw your lack of natural weapons and soft skin and assumed you were weak. We were wrong. Katie felt her throat tighten with emotion, but she kept her voice steady. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted, Vex said. Humans survived on Earth by being the best endurance hunters in the planet's history. We tracked prey for days until they collapsed. We climbed mountains that other animals could not climb. We crossed deserts that killed everything else. We survived ice ages and volcanic winters and every disaster nature could throw at us. We did not do it with claws or fangs. We did it with our minds and our refusal to quit. The cubs understood that. They saw how I moved, how I thought, how I adapted. They recognized a hunter. Vex lowered his head in acknowledgement. You are correct. And we should have seen it too. Starting today, the Academy will revise its evaluation protocols for human cadets. You will be assessed based on your actual capabilities, not on outdated assumptions. Captain Lyra smiled. There is more, Cadet. We would like to offer you a position as a survival instructor. You would teach both human and alien cadets the techniques you used in the Razorback. Your skills could benefit the entire coalition. Katie felt pride swell in her chest. Teaching was something her grandfather always said was the highest calling. Passing on knowledge to the next generation, she would be honored to do that. I accept, she said. Excellent, Commander Throck said. Now let us return to the Academy. The entire Cadet Corps is waiting to welcome you back. The shuttle ride back was nothing like her drop 5 days ago. Then Katie had been alone with her doubts and determination. Now she sat surrounded by senior officers who treated her with genuine respect. They asked her questions about her techniques. They wanted to know how she identified safe plants and good shelter locations. They were actually listening to her. When the shuttle approached the Academy, Katie looked out the window and saw something that made her breath catch. The entire parade ground was filled with cadets. Hundreds of them, from dozens of different species, all standing in formation. Human cadets stood at the front, their faces showing fierce pride. The shuttle landed and the door opened. Katie stepped out to the sound of cheering. It was not just the humans cheering. Alien cadets from every species were applauding. Some were making their own species gestures of respect. The sound washed over Katie like a wave. Connor Blake, her fellow human cadet, broke formation and ran up to her. He grabbed her in a tight hug. You did it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You proved them all wrong. You showed them what we can do. Katie hugged him back, then pulled away to face the assembled cadets. Vex called for silence and the crowd quieted. He stood on a raised platform where everyone could see him. Today we honor Cadet Katie Sullivan for her exceptional performance in the Razorback survival exercise, Vex announced. But more than that, we acknowledge a truth that should have been obvious from the beginning. Humanity is not a prey species. They are survivors, adapters, and hunters who have earned their place among us. Captain Lyra stepped forward holding a small case. She opened it to reveal a decoration that gleamed in the sunlight. It showed a stylized predator's claw made from silver and crystal. "This is the Apex achievement," Lyra said. "It is awarded only to cadets who complete missions far beyond expected capabilities. Cadet Sullivan, you have earned this honor." Katie stood at attention while Lyra pinned the decoration to her uniform. The crowd erupted in cheers again. Katie felt tears sting her eyes but refused to let them fall. Not yet. She had to get through this ceremony first. Commander Throck spoke next. "Let this be a lesson to all of us. Strength comes in many forms. Speed, power, armor, and weapons are valuable. But so are endurance, adaptability, intelligence, and determination. A true warrior recognizes and respects all forms of strength." The ceremony continued for another hour. Different instructors spoke about the changes that would be implemented. Human cadets would no longer face discriminatory treatment. Training would be adjusted to recognize human strengths, rather than focusing only on weaknesses. Several alien cadets came forward and publicly apologized for their own prejudices. When it was finally over, Katie made her way back to her quarters. She needed to shower, eat a real meal, and sleep in an actual bed. But first, she stopped at her door and looked at the picture of her grandfather. She touched the frame gently. "I hope you saw that, Grandpa," she whispered. "I hope you know that everything you taught me mattered. You showed me that giving up is never an option. You showed me that true strength is in here." She tapped her head, and here she pressed her hand over her heart. "Thank you for making me strong enough to prove them wrong." A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Katie opened it to find a group of cadets standing there. Both humans and aliens. They looked nervous but determined. A Torgash cadet smaller than Commander Throck but still imposing spoke first. "Cadet Sullivan, we wanted to apologize. Many of us treated you poorly because we believed what we were told about humans. We were wrong. We would be honored if you would join us for dinner and tell us about your time in the Razorback." Katie looked at the group. She saw genuine regret on their faces. She saw curiosity and respect. These were not the same cadets who whispered that she would fail. Something had changed in them, just like something had changed in the instructors. "I would like that," Katie said. "Give me an hour to clean up and I will meet you in the dining hall." The cadet smiled and left. Katie closed her door and leaned against it. She had set out to prove that one human could complete the survival exercise. Instead, she had changed how the entire galaxy saw her species. The journey was not over. There would still be challenges ahead. But now at least humans had a fighting chance to show what they could really do. Katie looked out her window at the Razorback Mountains in the distance. Somewhere in those peaks, 3 Vorath cubs were probably playing or hunting or learning new skills. They would grow into formidable predators one day, and they would remember the strange 2-legged hunter who taught them about snares and cooked meat and the value of patience. She smiled at the memory of their golden eyes watching her with such intelligence and curiosity. Those cubs had seen her true. 3 months had passed since Katie completed the Razorback survival exercise. The changes at the academy had been swift and significant. Human cadets no longer faced the constant doubt and discrimination that had been normal before. Training protocols had been revised to recognize different types of strength. Most importantly, the other cadets had started to see humans as genuine equals. Katie stood in front of a classroom filled with 30 cadets from 12 different species. This was her first official class as a survival instructor. The cadets watched her with attention and respect. No one whispered that she was too weak to teach them. No one questioned her authority. "Today we will discuss adaptability," Katie said. "Many species focus on using their natural advantages in survival situations. Kryn cadets rely on their armor and strength. Torgash cadets use their size and power. These are valuable traits. But what happens when your natural advantages do not help? What happens when you face an environment that makes your strengths irrelevant?" A Kryn cadet raised one of his forearms. "That is when we fail," he said honestly. "That is when we need rescue." Katie nodded. "That is what most species believe. But humans learned a different lesson on Earth. We did not have the biggest claws or the strongest jaws. We could not survive underwater like some species. We could not fly. We had almost no natural advantages compared to the predators we competed against, so we learned to adapt. We learned to make any environment work for us instead of against us." She pulled up images on the classroom screen. These show different environments on Earth. Frozen tundra where the temperature drops to -40 degrees. Burning deserts where water is almost impossible to find. dense jungles where poisonous creatures hide everywhere, mountain peaks where the air is too thin to breathe properly. Humans learn to survive in all of these places, not because we changed our biology, but because we changed our thinking. A Sylvan cadet spoke up. How did you learn these skills? Did your ancestors teach you? Yes, Katie said. My grandfather taught me everything he knew about survival. He learned from his father, who learned from his father before that. Humans pass knowledge down through generations. We learn from our elders and from our mistakes. Every failed attempt teaches us something. Every success becomes a lesson for the next person. The class continued for 2 hours. Katie taught them about reading terrain, identifying water sources, building effective shelters with minimal materials, and most importantly, maintaining the mental strength to keep going when everything seemed impossible. The cadets took notes and asked questions. They treated her knowledge with the seriousness it deserved. After class ended, Katie walked through the academy grounds toward her favorite spot. It was a balcony that overlooked the Razorback Mountains. She came here when she needed to think or just wanted to remember where she had been. The view never got old. The mountains rose against the sky like ancient guardians. Katie knew every peak and valley visible from here. She had traveled through that wilderness and survived it. More than survived. She had thrived and made connections that changed everything. A familiar chirping sound made Katie turn around. 3 Vorath cubs bounded across the balcony toward her. They were bigger now, almost 5 feet long each. Their spots had darkened with age, but Katie recognized them immediately. The crown-marked one led the group, just like always. Hey there, Scout, Katie said, using the name she had given the leader. She knelt down and the cubs surrounded her, chirping happily and bumping against her with their heads. She scratched behind their ears, knowing they liked that. The academy had given special permission for the cubs to visit the grounds twice a week. Scientists wanted to study the bond between Katie and the Vorath, but it was more than just research. The cubs genuinely enjoyed spending time with her. They still learned from her, watching everything she did and trying to copy her techniques. Captain Lyra approached the balcony, carrying her ever-present tablet. Good morning, Katie. I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all, Katie said. The cubs moved to make space for Lyra, but stayed close to Katie. I wanted to share some news with you, Lyra said. Your story has spread beyond the academy. The Galactic Coalition Council has invited you to speak at their next session. They want to hear directly from you about human capabilities and how other institutions can improve their evaluation methods. Katie felt her stomach flutter with nerves. The council was the highest governing body in the coalition. Speaking to them meant addressing representatives from hundreds of worlds. That is a big responsibility, she said carefully. You have already carried a big responsibility, Lyra pointed out. You changed how an entire military academy views an entire species. Speaking to the council is just the next step. Besides, Scout and his siblings have shown the galaxy something important. They have shown that true recognition comes from respecting capability, not judging based on appearance. Scout chirped as if he understood he was being discussed. Katie smiled and stroked his fur. I will do it, she said. If it helps other humans face less discrimination, then I will speak to the entire galaxy if I have to. Lyra nodded approvingly. There is something else. We have received applications from 17 other worlds that want to send their human populations to train here. The Academy is becoming known as the place where humans can prove themselves. You started something bigger than one survival exercise, Katie. You started a movement. Katie looked back at the mountains. A movement. She had never intended that. She just wanted to prove that she personally belonged here. But Lyra was right. When you proved something about yourself, you proved something about everyone like you. Her success had opened doors for countless other humans who dreamed of serving in the coalition forces. That night, Katie sat in her quarters writing a letter to her mother back on Earth. She told her about the classes she was teaching and the speech she would give to the council. She told her about Scout and the other cubs who visited regularly. She told her that humans were finally being recognized as the survivors they had always been. Her mother's response came the next day through the communication network. Katie cried as she read it. Her mother wrote about how proud her grandfather would have been. She wrote about how the whole town in Montana was celebrating Katie's achievements. She wrote that Katie had become a symbol of human determination, someone who refused to accept limitations that others tried to place on her. The weeks passed quickly. Katie prepared her speech for the council while continuing to teach her classes. She worked with xenobiologists who studied the bond between humans and Vorath. She mentored new human cadets who arrived at the academy with hope instead of fear. On the day of the council speech, Katie dressed in her formal uniform. The Apex Achievement decoration gleamed on her chest. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone who had changed dramatically, from the uncertain cadet who arrived 6 months ago. That Katie had been determined but scared. This Katie was confident and secure in her place. The council chamber was enormous. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in curved rows that rose toward the ceiling. Katie stood at the central podium, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes on her. She took a breath and began speaking. She told them about growing up in Montana and learning survival skills from her grandfather. She told them about facing discrimination at the academy and deciding to prove herself rather than quit. She told them about the Razorback Mountains and the 5 days that changed everything. Most importantly, she told them about the Vorath cubs and what their recognition meant. Those cubs did not judge me based on claws or fangs, Katie said. They judged me based on my actions. They saw how I moved through their territory with purpose and skill. They saw how I adapted to challenges. They saw a hunter, a survivor, a creature that belonged in their world. I ask all of you to do the same. Look at what humans do, not just what we look like. Judge us by our capabilities, not your assumptions. The chamber was silent when she finished. Then slowly representatives began to stand. First one, then 10, then hundreds. They were giving her a standing ovation. Species from across the galaxy were acknowledging that she was right, that humans deserved recognition as equals. After the speech, Katie met with various council members who wanted to discuss implementing changes in their own organizations. They asked for her advice on evaluation protocols. They asked her to recommend other humans who could serve as instructors or consultants. The conversation lasted for hours. When Katie finally returned to the academy, she went straight to her balcony. The sun was setting over the Razorback Mountains, painting the peaks in shades of orange and purple. She stood there alone, processing everything that had happened. She heard chirping and turned to see Scout approaching. The cub was alone this time, his siblings probably out hunting with their parents. Scout walked up to Katie and sat beside her, looking out at the mountains. They stayed like that for a while, a human and a Vorath watching the sunset together. "Thank you," Katie said softly to the cub. "Thank you for seeing what others could not see. Thank you for treating me like I belonged." Scout made a low, rumbling sound that Katie had learned meant contentment. He bumped his head against her hand, asking for scratches. Katie complied, running her finger.